Imagine boarding a routine flight, each passenger lost in their own thoughts, and minutes later, everything changes forever. What if the last moments of a journey carry messages of faith, hope, and eternal significance? Every breath we take is a divine gift, one that became a haunting truth for those on AI Flight 171. It was meant to be a short flight, a simple journey through the Andes. Yet for the passengers of AI 171, the ordinary turned extraordinary and deeply timeless. In the final moments before tragedy struck, these travelers became living testimonies of courage, faith, and the fragile gift of life. This is not merely their story, it's a mirror reflecting our own mortal journey, inviting us to see each breath as part of an eternal tapestry. From the very start, as AI 171 lifted off, everything seemed normal. The cabin buzzed with typical chatter, families planning visits, business travelers steeped in emails, friends gossiping about their day. But higher above the mountains, at cruising altitude, the routine unraveled. An explosion, a sudden drop, panicked cries, then a desperate descent. In those final minutes, the veneer of normal life peeled away, revealing the raw heart of what matters most. Passengers spoke of silent prayers, whispered trust, and a sudden clarity that the present moment, each heartbeat, was supremely precious. One mother held her child, a businessman closed his eyes in prayer, a young woman texted her farewell. They stood on the brink of eternity, seeing clearly what we too are invited to see. Our lives are brief, our time limited, and our days should be counted with wisdom. In many spiritual traditions, there is a recurring theme: teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. In the emergency hours aboard AI 171, we witnessed this teaching lived out. Suddenly, there was no time for regrets, grudges, or meaningless distractions. What remained was the clarity of purpose, connection, prayer, acceptance, love. Each breath deepened in significance, not a given anymore, but a borrowed treasure. But how can we translate this moment of crisis into lasting transformation? How can the lessons whispered in fear become truths we carry into daily existence? The tragedy of AI 171 invites us to realign our compass. It asks us, if each breath is a gift, how will we use it? Will we squander it on worry or invest it in people, values, grace? As we reflect on these moments, we confront the gift of awareness. Most of our lives are spent sleepwalking, distracted by trivialities. But when the moment of truth comes, awareness wakes us up. Can we live each day more fully awake, more present? Then we face the trial of trust. Faced with disaster, many aboard AI 171 turned instinctively to prayer or held one another's hands. What does it look like to trust others, circumstances, possibly God, when control slips through our fingers? And finally, there's the promise of eternity. A plane may fail, bodies may return to dust, but these moments nudge us towards something beyond the here and now. Is our hope tethered only to today, or do we carry assurance that our unseen story continues? Each life aboard AI 171 became a living message. Their final actions, expressions, words, they form a kind of spiritual time capsule. One man offered his oxygen mask to a child. A flight attendant repeated words of calm and hope. A teenager clutched a cross given by her grandmother, eyes closed. These images remain imprinted, not only in memory, but in meaning. What if we lived like them? Not in fear, but in readiness. What if we started each day with gratitude for breath, not waiting for crisis to awaken us to eternity? AI 171 is more than a headline, it's a call to transformation. Each breath is not just air, it's opportunity to forgive, to speak truth, to listen deeply, to reach out, to let go, to believe. The beauty of that flight's final moments isn't in the terror, but in the truth it uncovered. When stripped of illusion, humans are capable of immense grace. In suffering, they choose connection. In fear, they choose prayer. In chaos, they choose presence. That's the lesson of AI 171, and the reason we must never forget. Let's carry their legacy, not just in story, but in action. Each breath forward is a sacred trust. Each moment a divine chance to live with eternity in mind. In the wake of the tragedy, the world responded with shock, grief, and questions. The crash site revealed the fragmented remains of what once held life, laughter, and hope. Yet amid the wreckage, there was more than destruction. There were clues, not just to the mechanics of the disaster, but to the emotional and spiritual depth of those final moments. Rescue teams, investigators, and local villagers alike were moved by what they found. Small gestures frozen in time, evidence of human connection in the face of finality. A child's teddy bear still gripped in tiny hands, a notebook open to a prayer, a wedding ring clutched between two fingers. These items were more than debris, they were echoes. They whispered of lives lived, of hearts opened, of moments consecrated by crisis. And as the stories began to emerge, they formed a mosaic that pointed not to despair, but to purpose. What those passengers did in their last minutes says more about who we are and who we could be than any sermon or lecture ever could. Families began receiving messages that had been typed but never sent. Passengers, realizing time was short, left voice notes, scribbled letters, mouthed words of love. A teenager told her mother she was proud of her. An elderly couple prayed aloud together, giving thanks for the life they had shared. These are not scenes of panic, but of peace forged in fire. Their courage wasn't loud, but it was luminous, and that light outshines even the darkest endings. We live in a culture that avoids death, that distracts itself from discomfort. But moments like this tear the veil away. They confront us with our vulnerability, not to frighten us, but to focus us. The truth is, every one of us is on a flight of unknown duration. We take off in the morning with plans for the future, unaware of what the day will truly hold. Will we land safely or be rerouted by fate? We do not know, but we can choose how we fly. This is the heart of the message hidden in the ruins of AI-171. Fly with intention. Live with purpose. Breathe with gratitude. Speak with love. Not someday, but now. Because the difference between ordinary and sacred is often just awareness. What made those final moments so meaningful was not that they were the end, but that they were lived with full presence. Stripped of illusion, what mattered remained. In interviewing families and survivors of similar incidents, a pattern emerges. It's not regrets that fill the last thoughts of the dying, it's relationships. Not status, but connection. Not possessions, but people. This is the recalibration that comes when mortality stares us down. And if we're wise, we won't wait for tragedy to realign us. We'll learn now what they discovered then. That's why the phrase, "number our days," holds such power. It's not a command to be morbid, but to be mindful. If we lived as if each day were numbered, each breath counted, how would we live differently? Would we forgive faster, love deeper, linger longer in the moments that feed our souls? Would we let go of what doesn't matter and cling to what does? The passengers of AI-171 teach us by example. In their final chapter, they wrote lessons that transcend language, culture, even time. Their actions, their stillness, their choices in extremity all become a sacred script. And it's a script we are meant to read, reflect on, and write into our own lives. Sometimes the most powerful sermons are preached in silence. No words, just presence. No spotlight, just sincerity. That's what happened aboard that aircraft. An unscripted, communal awakening. And though their physical voices are now quiet, their impact resounds. What if we paused each morning to thank God for breath? What if we measured success not by gain, but by grace? What if we remembered daily that time is the most generous and the most fragile gift we hold? AI-171's legacy could be fear, but instead it becomes faith. Not just religious faith, but faith in humanity, in purpose, in something beyond ourselves. Let this be our takeaway. We do not control the flight path, but we can choose the posture of our hearts. We cannot predict the turbulence, but we can prepare our spirits. We don't know when our journey will end, but we can walk or fly through it with eyes wide open, hands extended, souls awakened. Every story of tragedy holds within it the seed of transformation. And transformation begins with truth. The truth that our time is short, our impact immense, and our choice is eternal. The passengers of AI-171 did not expect to become teachers of timeless truths, but that's what they became. Their story is not over, because their message lives on, in us. As their story ripples outward, it begins to change those who hear it. Not through drama or spectacle, but through the still, steady impact of real lives faced with sudden finality. Those who survived, or who narrowly missed being on that flight, often speak of a permanent shift in how they see the world. Colors are brighter, conversations more sacred. Even silence becomes a space for reflection, not emptiness. What they experienced presses us all to consider. Must it take a disaster to wake us up to the miracle of life? Consider the traveler who missed AI-171 by minutes. A cancelled meeting had delayed him, saving his life. He would later say he cried for days, not only from grief, but from the weight of a second chance. "I was given back my days," he said. "I don't want to waste them." He quit his high-paying job to work in a hospice. He now sits with the dying, offering presents, something he once took for granted. Stories like his illustrate how brushes with death can birth lives of deeper meaning. But even for those far removed from the event, the story resonates. It speaks to anyone who's ever looked in the mirror and asked, "Am I living on purpose or just passing time?" There's something universal in the idea of a flight, of departure, journey, and unknown arrival. We are all in motion. What AI 171 offers is a reminder to make every segment of the trip sacred. Let us imagine, for a moment, our own version of a final descent, not in fear, but in clarity. If today were our last, how would we spend it? With whom? What words would we say, and which would we leave behind? These aren't just philosophical exercises, they are doorways to gratitude. When we live with the end in view, we begin to see the now with sharper focus. This is not a call to panic or paranoia. Quite the opposite. It's a call to presence, to peace. There's a strange paradox at play. When we accept that we are mortal, we actually live more freely. We begin to shed the false urgencies, the pressures of performance, the need to prove. In their place arises a quiet strength, a humility that embraces each day not as an entitlement, but a gift. Some passengers on AI 171 were known for their faith. Others were skeptical or spiritual, but not religious. But in those final minutes, all were united by the same truth. Breath is breath. Fear is fear. Hope is hope. No one was divided by politics or ideology. In extremity, the things that separate us fall away. What's left is shared humanity. And isn't that the message we need most in a divided world? A plane's tragedy becomes a parable. Not of fate or failure, but of what we all share beneath the surface. The longing to be known, to be loved, to find meaning. AI 171 forces us to ask, not why did it happen, but what can we do now? We can start by noticing. The sunrise through our kitchen window, the laugh of a friend, the comfort of a hand held. These are sacred seconds, they pass quickly, but each one builds a life of depth, a life prepared not just to survive, but to shine, even in darkness. Next, we forgive, because the weight of old wounds is too heavy for a soul that knows time is short. AI 171 reminds us that harboring resentment is a luxury we cannot afford. In the face of finality, grace becomes not just possible but urgent. Let go, speak peace, choose love, and then we give. Not just of money or possessions, but of attention, of listening, of showing up when it matters, of telling people what they mean to us while we still can. These small choices are the legacy makers. They're the oxygen masks we offer others in life's turbulence. One survivor who lost her husband in the crash would later say, "He didn't leave me a fortune, but he left me words. His last text, his last smile, his last prayer. That's the real inheritance." And indeed, those intangible things often matter most. They're not lost in the wreckage, they live on, echoing in the hearts of those left behind. In remembering AI 171, we honor not just lives lost, but lives lived well in the face of the end. We don't need to wait for a tragedy to awaken us. Their story is the wake-up call. Every heartbeat we hear is an invitation. Every sunrise we witness is a reminder. Every goodbye we say is a potential blessing. So we return to the core truth. Every breath is a gift. Not one is promised, and each one is powerful. Use them for truth, for kindness, for courage, for presence. Live as if eternity is closer than we think, because it is. The silence after impact was deafening. Not the kind of silence that comes from stillness, but the silence that echoes through grief, through shock, through the sudden loss of voices that were alive only moments before. In that quiet, those left behind began their own journey, a path marked by mourning, remembrance, and the search for meaning in the wake of loss. Yet even in their sorrow, many families and friends chose to look beyond the pain, reaching for something higher, something enduring. They asked questions not just about what happened, but about what mattered. How had their loved ones spent their final hours? Had they known peace? Had they felt fear? Had they felt alone? These were the questions that haunted the nights, and in seeking answers, many found comfort in the smallest details. A voice message never delivered. A smile caught on camera hours before takeoff. A journal entry written the morning of the flight. These fragments became sacred, piecing together a final portrait of those who had taken the journey but not returned. And in those stories, something unexpected emerged. Hope. Not in the event itself, but in the responses to it. Communities came together. Strangers prayed for families they'd never met. People paused their routines to hold space for others' grief. This unity, fleeting but profound, became a reminder that we are connected, not just by proximity, but by shared mortality. AI 171 was no longer just an event. It was a moment that revealed who we are and who we can become. As the world moved on, as headlines faded, the lessons endured. Survivors of near-identical situations continued to share insights that mirrored those of AI 171's legacy. In every case, a common thread wove through their words: clarity. Crisis strips away the excess. It reveals what we most cherish and most fear. It forces the question, what are we living for? We fill our days with tasks, with noise, with distractions that numb us to the deeper questions. But moments like this, when life is interrupted, awaken something ancient in us. They remind us that we were not made merely to consume or produce, but to connect, to wonder, to love, to prepare for something beyond the physical. Perhaps the most powerful gift that comes from tragedy is the chance to reframe our lives, to take inventory, to ask, if I had been on that flight, what would I have left behind? Not just in possessions, but in impact. Would I have said what needed saying? Given what needed giving? Forgiven who needed forgiving? These are the questions that change us, not by guilt, but by grace. There is no way to prevent all suffering, no path that guarantees a long life. But there is a way to live so that whether our days are many or few, they are rich, meaningful, and aligned with truth. The passengers of AI 171 did not plan to teach us this, but they have. Their lives, ordinary people on an ordinary day, became messages from eternity. One family shared that their daughter, just 19, had written in her journal that morning, "Today feels like a gift. I don't know why, but I just want to be grateful." She never came home. But her words became a torch passed on to others, igniting in them the desire to live with gratitude regardless of the unknown. Stories like hers shift something deep in us. We start to notice more, love more, fear less. We become less concerned with impressing and more invested in expressing. Because when we are reminded of our end, we begin to live from our center. And in that place, life becomes not a burden, but a sacred offering. It's easy to forget this in the rush of schedules and headlines and alerts, but the story of AI 171 breaks through the noise. It whispers to our souls, slow down, pay attention. This moment matters, this person matters. This breath, yes, this very one, is a miracle. When we live this way, the fear of death doesn't disappear, but it is transformed. It becomes not an enemy, but a teacher. It shows us what to value. It teaches us how to live, not later, but now. Because now is all we are ever truly promised. So we remember not just the flight, not just the fall, but the faces, the faith, the fierce love that lit the darkness. We remember to honor, yes, but also to transform. Their story becomes our turning point. We can choose to live in such a way that if our own final moments came suddenly, we would have nothing left unsaid, no act of love withheld, no beauty unnoticed. That is the gift of numbering our days, not to count them in fear, but to fill them with meaning. And when we do, we carry their legacy forward, not in sorrow, but in strength. There's a sacredness in remembering, a quiet, powerful form of resistance against forgetfulness. When we choose to remember, we say, your life mattered, your story changed us. The memory of those aboard AI 101 becomes more than a tribute, it becomes a compass, pointing toward the life we are meant to live. And in honoring their memory, we step into a deeper way of being, one that is rooted in presence, purpose, and peace. The call to number our days isn't about dread, it's about design. When we know our time is limited, we begin to arrange our lives differently. We speak with intention, we serve with humility. We wake up each morning aware that we are not owed this day, and we treat it like the wonder it is. This mindset transforms even the mundane. Chores become chances to care, meals become moments to savor, goodbyes become sacred, just in case they are the last. This shift isn't instant, and it doesn't always come easily. But stories like AI 171's have the power to accelerate it. They jolt us into seeing that the edge between life and death is thinner than we assume. And in that thin space, eternity is closer. What we do now echoes forever. That's why perspective is one of the most valuable gifts we can receive. It realigns priorities, reorients values, and recalibrates our inner compass. The survivor who decided to spend more time with his children. The widow who opened a foundation in her husband's name. The friend who forgave a grudge they'd held for decades. These actions weren't born out of fear. They were inspired by clarity. It's as if the tragedy peeled away the noise and left only the essential. And maybe we need that kind of clarity more than ever. In a world saturated with distraction, moments like this help us remember who we are and what we're here for. They give us the courage to ask the harder questions and to live the truer answers. Courage, after all, is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward in spite of it. The passengers of AI 171 didn't get to choose their fate, but they chose how to meet it. In doing so, they showed us what courage really looks like. Hands held tight, prayers whispered loud, love expressed with urgency. They remind us that we too have a choice. Each day, each hour, each interaction is a decision point. Will we choose resentment or reconciliation, distraction or presence, comfort or growth? These are not just personal decisions, they ripple outward. One act of kindness can shift a life. One apology can heal a wound. One moment of honesty can restore hope. So we look at their story not with despair, but with reverence. We don't merely mourn their loss, we allow their legacy to mentor us. We let their final moments become our first steps toward a fuller life. And we carry forward not just their memory, but their message, that life is precious, fleeting, and worth living well. In the aftermath, many gathered for memorials. Words were spoken, songs were sung, candles lit. Yet for some, the most powerful tributes came in silence, in tears shed alone, in quiet walks through nature, in journals filled with reflections on what truly matters. These personal acts of remembrance are no less sacred. They're the roots of transformation. And that's the invitation now, to live in a way that reflects their courage, their clarity, their love. To see every moment not as something to get through, but something to grow in. To treat time not as a resource to be spent, but a gift to be cherished. There's no guarantee how long any of us have, but there is the guarantee that our choices shape our legacy. Let it be said that we chose love over fear, depth over surface, meaning over motion. Let it be said that we didn't need a disaster to wake us up. We just needed to listen to the stories of those who walked before us and let them lead us into a better way. This is the path forward, not just remembering, but responding. Not just reflecting, but renewing. Letting each breath remind us, we are alive, we are able, we are accountable for the beauty we bring into the world. And that, perhaps, is the most sacred tribute of all. Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow with no memory of yesterday's worries, no trace of past regrets, just a deep awareness that this very breath is a miracle. You step into the day slowly, gratefully, not because something dramatic has changed, but because you've finally understood. Life is too sacred to live on autopilot. That's the lesson that echoes from AI 171, not just the fragility of life, but the immense beauty of it. The passengers didn't get to choose their final day, but they lived it fully in the end. Some gave, some comforted, some prayed, and some simply held on to love. What remains now is their impact. Their story has changed how we look at time and how we choose to use it. In those final minutes, there were no resumes, no arguments, no attention to what people wore or what they owned. There was only heart. And that's what the world needs more of. People living from the heart. With compassion, with courage, with the willingness to see even a regular Tuesday as holy ground. We each get to write our story. We each get to decide what our days will stand for. Will we be hurried, irritated, lost in distractions? Or will we wake up and say, today matters. Today I breathe with purpose. The shift may be small, but the effect is profound. This is how legacies are written, not in grand achievements, but in the tiny, deliberate choices we make each day. And those choices ripple. When you speak kindness, it echoes. When you forgive, you liberate not just another, but yourself. When you notice beauty, you remind others to pause and look too. That's how lives change. Not all at once, but steadily, deeply, by walking in awareness. There's no magic formula, just a willingness to slow down, to look someone in the eye and listen, to say thank you like you mean it, to let go of the need to be impressive and focus instead on being real. That's what the world remembers when you're gone. Not your titles, but your tenderness. As we honor those lost on AI 171, let us take up the torch they unintentionally passed on. Let us live the days they no longer have. Let us breathe for them, act for them, and love on their behalf. Not as a burden, but as a blessing. Because this is our moment now. And the question is simple. What will we do with it? We invite you to walk this path of awareness and presence with us. If this story moved you, if it shifted something in you, don't let it end here. There's more to explore, more to uncover, more ways to wake up to the eternal hidden in every ordinary moment. Subscribe to Holy Path Insights for weekly reflections that will lift your spirit, deepen your focus, and remind you that you were made for more than survival. You were made for sacred living. Watch our next video to continue this journey, because truth doesn't just inform, it transforms. Let's live like every breath is a gift, because it is.